Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's episode number 96 of the Audible Farm podcast. This episode is brought to you by Couchtown Coffee. Couchtown Coffee is roasted right here in Iowa, and it is some of the freshest and best coffee I've ever had in my life. If you don't believe me, try it yourself. Go to www.couchtowncoffee.com. Make an order there and save 20%. You can save 20% this week just because you listen to this podcast. And all you have to do is enter the code word Rumours. The code word is Rumours. So if you make an order, just mention the code word Rumours to them and they will take 20% off your order because they love music. It's kind of crazy because the owner of Couchtown is a musician himself. I did a podcast with him. You should check it out. So check it out. The code word this week is Rumours. Why is the code word this week Rumours? Because I'm sitting down with Stu Frondle. Stu is a guitarist in the Rumours as well as about 900 other bands. No, that's not true, but it's close. He plays guitar in the Rumours and as well as Brotherhood of the Mudkat and Pretty Dynamite and Space Virus. And I've actually played he's in another band called Sabbath. And you know, that's one of the coolest things about him is he's just so busy with music. He's in a bunch of different bands and he can lend his talents to different projects that span different styles of music. And I sat down with him this week because the Rumours are set to go out on tour in the next couple weeks. So we talk about that a little bit in the podcast, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the outro. But we go over all sorts of different things in this podcast, you know, as far as how he formed some of his bands, joining up with the Rumours, some of the crazy shows those guys have played, and they got an album that came out this year. There's all sorts of stuff that's been happening, so it's pretty cool. We sit down and get to know what's going on in the world of Stu, so I hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as I did. I've played shows with Stu, sharing the card with him in both the Rumours and the Space Virus, and it's fun to see him play and fun to get to know those guys, and every one of his bands that I've seen has been Dynamite, so it's definitely worth checking out if he's coming to your neighborhood. But hey, this is episode number 96 with Stu Frondle.
It's the Audible Farm Podcast with your host, Peter Stockdale.
So today I'm sitting down with Stu Frondle. Stu, I have actually seen you play live a handful of times with the Rumours, and even once with Space Virus, I was on a show with you, and it was pretty awesome. You guys put on a heck of a show in both camps.
Oh, wow. Thank you, man.
Yeah, definitely. I'm one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because you're going to be going on tour here pretty soon, actually, with the Rumours, and it's not a dinky little tour either. You're going to be going some places.
Right. Yeah. There's a whole lot of list on there. I've been checking this out, past couple of days too. Just been looking at everything that's going on in the world, and yeah, it's really interesting right now to be taking that kind of proclamation in your hands.
Yeah, definitely. It's crazy too, because I mean, you guys have gone on other tours before, though, have you not?
Oh yeah. There's been a lot of this stuff behind the scenes. We have to plan these things out for a couple months ahead of time, so it's no small feat, especially this time of year.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, I mean, this year has probably been just as hectic. Whether or not, did you guys end up having to cut off some of your tour dates, like earlier on, like in the June and area like that, or was most of your guitars?
There was a couple of times we went back and forth, and I can't always discuss which ones are going to happen or when they're going to happen at the end of the day, because there's certain issues, that come into play because of the coronavirus and other, liabilities there. I've worried about that here and there, just about going on the road during this time, and seeing some other places get shut down for a small period of time and then reopening quickly. It's just kind of a different era than it used to be. I mean, I think using some of these tour dates as a way to promote ourselves again, though, is smart, because there's a lot of things out there still, that aren't right on the map, that are having issues that are, more economic than this virus. I think in some regards we're just dealing with a double-edged sword, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's this weird thing where it's like if you guys don't go out there, there's nothing to be had just sitting around here in a sense, you know. Plus, there's not very many bands out there, you know, entertaining people right now. It's just, I mean, there are, but it's still kind of up to some of the bands don't really want to go out and play, and some of the bars only want to have one band a night now, you know. So a lot of things are changing. So, I mean, I guess if you can go out there and play, why not go out there and play?
I mean, there are some liabilities there, though, and I think as the weeks go on here, we may reschedule, we may look at other things, but we're always open to change. You know, that's at the end of the day, we're very optimistic people, but we're not just going to run out there if it's not looking good. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
So I don't ever hold that back personally. I don't know. I don't speak for every member of the band with that either. But I think it's just such an odd time right now, and we're all facing new decisions every day. So we have to kind of throw out the history book for a minute. You know, I don't know what else to tell people sometimes about it, because it's kind of an odd issue. You know.
Yeah,
it's not a horrible place to be, though, to have a decision to make. You know, I'm very fortunate. Some people don't have that decision.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the best part about this is, like you said, you're still open-minded to everything. So even if this tour, maybe a handful of the dates don't happen, like it still might end up happening later in the year or next year, because, like we said, this is not the first time the Rumours have, went on a tour that's this extensive.
Right, you know, and if it's just safer to push things back a couple weeks, you know, a couple months, I would rather be flexible with the venues in that regard. But we're walking straight into this uptick. You know, I haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime. I don't think you have either.
Oh, definitely not. It's pretty wild. I mean, I haven't been playing too much music, only like 3 or 4 years worth live, but it's still pretty wild to be like, everything's wide open, then all of a sudden it just bottlenecks and shuts off for like half a year, and it's been pretty weird. Like even trying to have a podcast to talk to people, because it's like, well, nobody's playing shows, so what else is everybody up to, you know? And it's kind of a weird one. It's a weird one for bands or all entertainers or bar owners, or I guess just pretty much anyone, because we're all affected by this.
I've just been kind of creating lately. I've been recording some solo stuff even that no one's ever heard, you know, and just trying to keep those creative juices going, because I think that's the hardest thing, is you just start to rust. You feel like the stagnation starts to weigh down. You're like, man, it's been how many months? 5 months? You know, wow, you know.
Yeah, I mean, some of my buddies are playing. Go for it.
I think Alice Cooper said something recently about how he liked having this forced vacation after all those years of doing this. And I thought that was kind of bizarre. I think that was one of the weirdest quotes I've heard recently.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could see where he would think that way, but he's also made millions, and there's people that are still trying to make their money and that can't.
Yeah,
you know. So.
Yeah, it's an odd predicament.
Yeah, definitely. The Rumours actually had an album come out earlier this year, right?
Oh yeah. That's been sitting around for a little while. Yeah, we recorded that probably a year straight. That's our new album called "Suck It."
Yep,
which is a great title. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it makes me feel like, you know, I'm watching professional wrestling in the late '90s.
You know, now that you talk about that.
No, it's cool though. Like, I love seeing bands like yours come out with albums, and I mean, I think there's something to be said about recording literally anything with a band and coming up with anything, let alone having enough material and concept to make a whole album out of it. It's pretty wild. It's something that's kind of neat. It like solidifies it in history as if it's permanently there. And you guys have more than one recording that is actually available online, at least to buy or stream in most places.
Yeah, it's all available on all platforms, you know. Hot Bang from our prior release, but you know, this is just taking that whole style up to another, taking it to 11, so to speak, really. Yeah,
definitely. How long have the Rumours been playing?
Oh, it's been about 4 and 5 years now. I mean, it feels like maybe longer than that. I don't keep track of dates. Somebody out there knows the exact point in time, but yeah, we just been doing stuff lately, you know. Like when I first joined up, it was it was crazy. They were already playing like hairball. They were doing things like I was like dreaming of, and I'm like, how did these two chicks do that, and it just totally blew me away.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So you weren't involved in the band when it first started?
Well, there was a female drummer, and then there was two other guys in the band, and that was like the first lineup way back in high school.
Oh, nice.
For Carly Fox and them, and they were playing talent shows and stuff, and they were playing hairball, and they were doing things, and at the end of the day, it ended up coming around that somebody else wasn't in the band anymore. They wanted to get another guitar player, another bass player. So me and Arnella came into the fold, and then later we got Daniel. A couple months later after that, we had played with Joan Jett and the Blackhearts before Daniel was in the band. That we had another drummer before named Jeff, and it's just a really, really cool thing when you can see a group sustain that level of success through different lineups. There's something else cooking there.
Yeah, definitely. It's bigger than, generally speaking, it's bigger than any one person in the band at that point.
Yeah, that's something I noticed about it. Like for sure, the first whiff, I was like, man, there's something in here. There's like nitro in the tank. It just it gets up and goes. You don't have to. Just fiddle around. It's just like an old Corvette or something. You know what I mean? It just happens.
Yeah, man. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the crowd definitely seems to take to that. Every time I've seen you live, I've seen you in like a small full of like Des Moines area bars and stuff like that. And doesn't matter how big or small the place is, you guys play like it's huge and it's packed every single time.
Yeah, there's like some kind of throwback mentality too, like these big old arena shows you used to go to, and everybody was just hanging out and talking about stuff. I don't know, we don't have such a chip on our shoulders about going out and hanging out with people, and that's the hardest thing. Like right now with this COVID, you can't socialize, you can't be wherever you want to be, but that was where we always would go out and have a cigarette and talk about liner notes with people or something, just hang out and have a beer, totally be off the wall with people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really cool to see you guys come out and play live, because it's not a gimmick by any means to say that you're just a female fronted band. It's real music. We just encourage
it. Yeah, we love everything about everybody. We don't want to censor the female voice at all. We want that to be the forefront of our distinction. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of bands in the past that were too afraid to even like allow some of that to sneak through. I mean, we've had Blondie, we've had Joan Jett, we've had a lot of it come to the fore in the past 20, 30 years of like pop culture that came by, and then it felt like maybe like when the music genres themselves started to walk more in that kind of whole direction, and everything was very pro-feminine for a minute there.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. I think after like 2001, after 9/11, I think there was a little more censorship that we ran into, maybe, or I don't know exactly how you want to put it, but I think politics influenced our amount of freedom sometimes, as artists. There was a point where like the Dixie Chicks were getting, frowned upon by the Bush administration. Some of that stuff gets kind of walked over the years. We don't really think about that today. We're thinking about what Trump said or tweeted or whatever. But, there's just times where creativity gets politically stifled, whether you like it or not,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, do you think there's any of that that's going on in today's musical scene at all, as far as like stifling of people's creative abilities? Because I feel like right now, if you still see, there's still a lot of people out there creating things. And I think that regardless of, the obvious downfalls of the pandemic, the benefit has been that people that create things have been sitting at home still creating things.
Yeah, I think a lot of creative entities know when not to play that politics too, of how to kind of, I don't know, at least be able to walk away from it for a minute and be able to go back to what you started with, go back to your roots,
Yeah. I think some of it might be like a low-hanging fruit type deal, where like some people that are artists don't want to go after that obvious thing where it's like, well, I could, sing a song about Trump, but everyone, it's like a tired joke. It's one that everyone could think of,
Right. It's like you're going to divide you're going to have your Packers fans and your Chicago Cubs fans, and you're going to put them against each other every night. And that's fine for sportscasting, but it doesn't work in music the same way.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's a great analogy, man. Like it's like saying, what team do you root for? And it's like, well, we're Packers fans. And then when the Packers fans are like, woo, and all of a sudden you're like, no, we're Bears fans. And then
this
boo.
is the Kiss Army, Yeah, it just doesn't work the same way, And I think people lose their integrity along the way when they inherently love a band, and you can't, I don't think you can hate Ted Nugent, for instance, because of the Great White Buffalo Riff. I don't think that those two things have anything in common with each other, and you can have two different opinions about them.
That's true.
I get locked away on these chats with people, online like anybody, and I see these constant back and forth, and it's to me it seems like a lot of wasted breath.
Yeah, it's like you said, you can't really blanket statement one thing entirely, because like the Ted Nugent one would be a good argument where like I like to go to jam nights and I like to play Ted Nugent songs because they're relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but they're easier and easy to jam out and solo to and stuff. But like they're classics and everybody knows them. And
he didn't even sing on Stranglehold, man. Like nobody knows this thing, man. But like that song was written by almost like a whole other entity, and then he kind of became famous with Stranglehold.
Yeah.
But he's only playing guitar on it.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. You can like somebody's art but dislike their politics, and I feel like that's a dichotomy that's not being represented very well. But, this isn't necessarily a political podcast, though, so... so maybe...
Oh, man, there's so many avenues for success out there.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of different avenues, let's take a detour from the Rumours and talk a little bit about Space Virus. I saw you guys play at a show once. We were on the bill, and... It was insane. You guys got masks, you got smoke machines, you got lights. It's insane. You guys still doing the whole gambit?
Yeah, we've added a couple TV screens actually.
What? Holy cow!
Yeah, I've got a whole set of like ephemeral footage from the 50s and like a lot of like really horrible things and old 90s like horror movie looking stuff. Some of it's just sampled from like, I don't know. There's like this old Discovery Channel, like Lifetime TV movie kind of thing. And it's like the end of days or something. And something's like getting nuked or something. And they had this really bad 90s effect for like when the nuke hit. And like people were like turning into like static or something. I don't know. So we'll find those really obscure clips like that. And we'll find ways to like put them into the show. It's just this really cool kind of throwback thing that we started doing one day. And I don't know, I found just a couple hundred different ones online and started just syncing it up to the show. And I was like, this is so different and so visual, we got to throw it in, And so then it just became part of this what if machine,
Yeah.
That Space Virus has also been like, the band in a couple places. We got kicked out in Chicago. There was just a whole lot of really weird times with this band that kind of fueled me making these different live effects, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to kind of explore that. But Space Virus hasn't been able to get together as much right now with all this pandemic, which is a real irony that the virus band can't do what it wants to do.
So
I don't know, man.
As the Rumours would be described as like rock and roll, classic rock, somewhere in the 80s hair metal-ish, almost, maybe a little bit of like the blues rocky. It's a perfect mix of that 80s awesomeness. How would you describe Space Virus?
Oh, yeah. It's so much more like that 90s heavy thing like we had with Rob Zombie, Marilyn Manson, a little bit of Ministry in there for sure. There's so many cool, different, like heavy bands that came out of the 90s, like Fu Manchu and Electric Wizard and Sleep and things that I was influenced by too, that I didn't necessarily get to like just throw down on, in an 80s rock and roll band. So for me, it was more of a musical outlet for me to go kind of like, what did I actually grow up listening to a lot of, this and this. And maybe explore that with somebody else that has different influences. Like my lead vocalist, he plays in a Misery Machine, which is a Marilyn Manson tribute band. He looks almost identical to Brian Warner. So nice. we definitely draw on this kind of like stoic, dark atmosphere that not a lot of other groups are going to go out there and proclaim, some of these like visual things we're using, and different, just really, really, really heavy, scary things like Stuxnet and, the end of days, biblical prophecies turning into like computer viruses. I don't know. We just we come up with all these bizarre heavy metal things, in our heads all the time. There's movies like this old 80s thrasher movie. It's like Chopping Mall. Some of these robots that go through and just murder everybody in this mall. It just says it matches up with some of these horrible headlines, as funny as it is.
You say chopping mall?
Chopping Mall, yeah. Look it up sometime.
I'm gonna have to. I'm writing it down.
I've watched it about 1,000 times during quarantine, so it may be on our next album.
Oh gosh, that's insane. That's really funny though. Like, I think the coolest thing here is the fact that you have musical talents that you can lend to two completely different projects altogether and still maintain both of them.
I've got a whole lot of projects back in my hometown. I'll just hit people up all the time. I'm definitely not doing just one band at any length of time. I try to create almost at the height of it. I was actually doing 4 or 5 rehearsals a week.
Oh wow!
Between various tribute bands and things, it was just a big outlet for me to stay positive, and I really enjoyed it, for a long time. But some people get burned out doing that, so
yeah,
I can see not wanting to be a part of so many things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think everyone's life has, but like it's one of those things where sometimes you're not that busy and you're like, well, I'm going to start getting busy, and then you just get really busy, and before you know it, you're looking around and you're like, man, I am really busy, and then you're just like, I'm going to tone it down a notch, and it's just one of those things. I feel like once you kind of get ramped up in something, it can take over before you even know it.
Especially with a wife and a 2-year-old, you can't be like, hey, I remember you.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
You got to keep everybody on the same radar. So yeah, it's a lot of balance, but they love what I do and I love what I do. So we all have made concessions to make it work.
That's awesome, man. Speaking of family, your brother plays with you in Space Virus, correct?
Yeah. That's kind of like their little Van Halen thing, with the brother guitar player lineup.
That's awesome. Did he plays drums, you play guitar? Have you guys always played that and like grew up together playing drums and guitar, or how did that work?
Yeah, actually, that was kind of how it started. I started with the bass guitar. It was all just low end and sound, and I wasn't any good at the bass, so I jumped to guitar eventually, and but yeah, he always had the drums laying around, and I was like, yeah, just let's mess around out in the basement for a bit, and see what we come up with. And yeah, that was cool growing up to have that. Not many kids get to just go down and jam with their brother every day.
Did you guys take lessons to get better, or did you learn in school, or how did that all come about?
I used to get lectured by the band teacher, and she's like, why don't you take your trumpet home with you? You don't practice and all this stuff. And it just never really seemed like my thing. I was kind of anti-discipline at that age. I just didn't really think, well, what's the point? I'm going to go home and play trumpet to my parents. That's not going to really go over,
Yeah.
Do it at 4 or 5 in the morning, wake up the neighbors. There was no practical use for a trumpet. So I think that's what lacked its manifest destiny. But then becoming like a bass player was like an idea that I had, because like it seems like you can never find a bass player or a drummer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just remember that as a kid, even thinking, I'm like, like I see all these people that are like, yeah, we'd have a band, but we don't have X or Y.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, how can I fix this equation? So we would just jam out because we couldn't find the other 2 people either, so it was kind of like the white stripes kind of thing, it was, well, we got 2 people. Let's see where we can go.
You had like the reverse issue most people had, where you had a bassist and a drummer, but you couldn't find anybody else. That's pretty insane.
But then I really wanted the guitar all of a sudden. Like there was all these fuzz sounds and the first Black Sabbath album and just things that I'd heard at that point in my life. I was like 15 or so, and I was like, this is great, but I could do more. Like, there's more stuff I can mess with, and I never looked back. I really have. I mean, I play everything in the studio here and there, but I don't really jump on the drums much. But I can play anything, now. It seems I can play that. I was playing the Star Spangled Banner last night, on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
I'm sure my neighbors loved it. But, I just never really kind of stopped after I switched to guitar, I guess. So I think that was the best thing that we gave to each other, because now he's still playing drums, and we've got 2 or 3 other little groups that we play around in, that we're able to explore this fun thing called music.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I think having a sibling that plays music would be an amazing thing to have. It would be so fun to be able to connect with somebody on that deeper level than just conversation.
It's great and all, and as philosophical as it can be, it turns into that snowball fight in the backyard, though, with your sibling, where somebody threw the ice ball, and you don't want to name names. Mom and Dad know you're both mad.
Yeah.
Won't talk at dinner. There's moments of that too. So, yeah, it's like any relationship. You have to take the good with the bad and make something of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's pretty sweet. I mean, my sister plays piano and like saxophone and things like that. But once again, it's the common application. It's not easy always to mix instruments together, especially like if you grew up playing. You grew up playing the trumpet, so did I. But it's not like my sister and I are gonna rock a trumpet sax duet.
Well, see, I was playing flute before that, but they were making fun of me so bad that like I couldn't take it. Like I was getting hazed every day by these like band kids. Come on, what the hell?
Oh man, and that's the other thing. Like the older
reeds and sticks,
Yeah. The older I got, the more I wanted to learn how to play every instrument, though. It's like, it would be neat to know how to play a flute, if somebody just walked up and it's like, here's a flute, and you're like, all right, I can honk something out on this, and
Yeah. That was where I was at when I was younger. I think it was like The Legend of Zelda or something. I heard like those ocarina songs, and I was like, sounds like a flute, sure, whatever. I just I had to pick an instrument. And I'm like, well, everybody else is doing all these cool loud things. I wanted something that was more like that leads like tone. I think in my head I was still listening to all these different leads, like Sweet Child of Mine or something. It's in that same kind of fluty register. I think some people are just wired to that.
Yeah.
Like you'll see it in certain people that are drummers that don't know it. They'll just be tapping on school desks all day.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, that guy's a drummer. He doesn't know it. He doesn't know it yet.
Yeah, and the world needs more drummers, so call those people out.
Yeah, get them over here.
Oh, man. That is true, though. Like, you can tell a lot about somebody's personality by whether or not they played an instrument in school and what instrument they played. Because, I mean, you'll see a lot of trumpet players that are guitar players because they want to be, loud and in your face. And
Yeah.
I do like the parallel you drew between the flute, though, and, like, Sweet Child of Mine, where, like, the tones are a little bit more comparable. Because, like, the tone of, like, the flute is, like, kind of has a little bit of punctuation, but it's also, like, very warm and airy.
Yeah. There's just a certain, like, vibe that things have in the world. And I visited Paisley Park this year, believe it or not, in 2020. Cool. In February. And I was like, just to be in those rooms and be around that equipment. They played us this piece of music that Prince had that no one had ever heard. That was never released, and you could only hear it by being on the tour in that room.
Oh wow!
So you can't look it up. Like if I told you to go look it up right now, you can't hear this.
Oh, that's
so it's
crazy.
Like Prince singing into a microphone in a saxophone, into guitar pedals, into the board. And it sounds like nothing I've ever heard. Like I've heard so many Moogs and pedals, and you look up the earthquaker device of the day, and I could probably tell you exactly what the color it is and everything. I love the sound of all these different pedals and things that are out there. So I'm always like blown away when I hear something I've never heard before like this. But I don't know if there's anywhere you can look it up, but they told us on the tour that they took everybody's phone and put them in lead cases after we turned them off.
Oh, wow.
And there was a little clip thing in it, so you couldn't take it apart on the tour because they didn't want anybody taking photography of like his kitchen and like where he slept and places. I don't know. We didn't take the full tour. We only took a certain amount of it, and you could be there for days. It's a huge complex, but Yeah, just to see what influenced those people for like 20 minutes of your time was like, wow. And to be sitting in Studio A listening to it through his monitors is like, I mean, how ineffable of a conversation is that? You know,
That's pretty wild. I mean, it's also neat that you enjoy, like you said, the different tones that can come out of things. Because, I mean, we don't talk too much about gear on here, but I also do love gear just as much as the next guy. So I will entertain the conversation. I mean, obviously, sometimes you just get a handful of pedals and you're like, what do these do? Or you start to find things that are in a certain area and you're like, what other pedals are kind of like this, but also incorporate some of this into it, you know? So
yeah,
it's
just this like a sonic exploration of being able to paint with different colors. You know, maybe you don't have that same fluorescent construction orange that you see on the side of the road every day. And when you get home and you have to paint it with this kind of muddy orange you have in your paint kit, you know, and it can be frustrating as an artist not to be able to get those different colors and sounds exactly when you want them, you know. And I've managed for years to just like overcome some of those technological issues, you know, like to now where I have something that runs like a rack mount with an amp and pedals where you hit one switch and it, you know, changes the channel on all three things, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And just little those like synchronicities of music that people don't maybe understand. That's how that sound that Prince has on Purple Rain works. You know, it doesn't seem inherent at first that he would need so many harmony things for like when the doves cry, you know, but you start putting these pieces of equipment to sounds and you're like instantly inspired, you know?
Yeah,
You're
definitely.
Like, at least from their perspective, you can see why some of this would be more important, you know, but some people, they don't care about the MIDI function of, you know, 90-year-old rack gear.
Yeah.
It flies right over their head.
True. You know, and that is one of the benefits of building a rack system. And I mean, I have one that I built just for the simple fact that I was intrigued by it and I wanted to see if I could set it all up to do that. And I did, which is cool. I just don't use it live. I probably should, but.
See, in Space Virus, I found a way that I can run some of the lights and video off of the same MIDI that I'm triggering things with. So I found some different integrities that, like, at first I'm like, I will never use this live. There's no reason. But then you get a hold of it and you're like, yes, this is it. This is it.
That's cool. That's sweet. I've always wanted to try to figure some of that out because I know that some of that works with certain
like
different
you go
rigs.
Watch, like Tool or somebody, they have this amazing live show. And you're like, how does that work, you know? And you really start to watch those rig rundown videos. You're like, oh, wow, there's something going on here.
Yeah, it's really wild too. Like the first time I ever saw that, like some bands play to a metronome, and the metronome actually is synced up to computers that, you know, like you said, trigger the lights and everything else. You know, and it's like, oh, that's why they play to the metronome, because it syncs everything up perfectly and it removes some of the human error.
You're playing on a different chessboard at that point, you know. It's just a totally different game.
Yeah, I mean that's chess while everyone else is playing checkers for sure. Oh man, so like, what was like your first pedal you got then? Maybe I'll ask you that.
Wow, that's been a long time ago. It was I think it was two different pedals, I guess. One was digital. It was like an RP80 or something, which is like a digital multi-effect. Yep. And none of them actually sound that different. But you can fool yourself for a while. You're like, oh, hey, I got a practice amp, so I don't really hear fidelity.
Yeah.
When I grew up, see, I had been playing the bass guitar, so I traded off the bass and kept the amp. So I had this big low end coming out of my stuff. So, like, I didn't realize most practice amps were garbage until I got much older. But this thing was actually pretty good sounding for what it was, like a Fender Rumble or something. And then, so I would plug that thing into it.
Dude, the Fender Rumbles were always pretty good. I'm sure you got one of the older models that were heavy.
Well, it was like a Rumble 30. It was like for like the all-in-one starter model. Yeah. So like you would get the little bass guitar with it, and it's an off-white Fender P bass. And I remember just like thrashing that around for a couple weeks and got bored of it like the trumpet. So I was like, yeah, next instrument. So then I got this little orange DoD fuzz pedal too that I got about that same time. Those were my first two pedals. And I had an Ibanez guitar. It was like kind of like a Melody Maker shape, just kind of a big flat pancake SG. Mm-hmm. And yeah, those things were great. I don't know whatever happened to any of that stuff. It's gone now. Somebody owns it.
You've always been one to like try out different gear. I'm friends with you on Facebook. That's some of my funnest things I see you post is when you're just like, oh, I bought this thing and now I'm taking it apart and I'm
it's on fire.
And now we're gonna put it all back together and somehow it almost always works. It's pretty wild. What got you started into that?
I had a friend growing up named Cole, and he was a circuit bender. And I think he was in the military possibly for a while. And he just had a lot of these really, really cool talents like that. Like he would be able to like, hey, check out this, take this part out of this walkie-talkie and this thing. And he would always take Casio keyboards apart and circuit bend them. And that was like his favorite thing to do all the time. And so I was like, I got to try this circuit bending thing. This is something like not a lot of people are really into, but what you do is you just take an alligator clip and a nail or whatever that's conductive material, and you just open up a children's toy. It's under 9 volts. That's battery operated. It won't electrocute you. It won't hurt you. You can actually like, you can touch this stuff and like lick your hand and the conductivity changes and things. And, you just start learning about electricity on a much more primitive level.
Oh, whoa.
And then you just end up like, you'll just connect like 2 or 3 parts of these chips together and it'll freak out and it'll sound like a cardinal having a heart attack, Wow, that's cool. Okay, what happens if I do this one? And if I put it on a knob and move this? And so recently I took a little Casio keyboard and I just ended up spray painting it and doing one of these circuit bend rituals, basically is what I call them. And I got 2 or 3 different ones. I got like this Japanese stylophone, which is kind of like instead of having a musical keyboard, you use a pencil.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen those.
It's like, yeah, and it's like conductive, so it goes up and down in pitch. And some of them will have like different resistors to determine that, but other ones will just be like a big rail, and it'll just draw up and down, and it gives it this big Pink Floyd noise, So like I'll use elements of that and into like reverbs, and I'll put all this stuff like on a Space Virus album, and nobody really knows where it came from, Like, oh, what plugin was that? Well, it's not really a plugin, It's like 30 different things. So like there's these cool elements that are like you would think are kind of like throwaway things that are like I'll find them at Goodwill or Salvation Army, or people will bring them to me and say, can you do anything with this one, or is it junk? Like a lot of them you won't know till you open it up. Like you open it up and it'll have this big black blob of glue that they'll put over the IC chip, and you can't do anything with it. To try and get that off there, you'll end up destroying it.
Oh man!
So there's certain things you can't circuit bend. So it's kind of this adventure of like, kind of like when I went to Paisley Park and I heard that crazy thing. I was like, wow, I've never heard that before. And the fact that that's still around the corner somewhere for me is like, as an artist, is like, yes, that's where we're going. Like the next planet to conquer.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Like to even think that. I don't know. Like first off, like there's companies out there that are trying to keep people from doing goofy stuff like circuit bending their stuff, and I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
that's
why that
asinine.
would even. Yeah, I don't even know why it would be a thing, but it apparently is a thing. So, and that's the other thing. I was like, I've always been intrigued by some of that electrical noise music because there's something fun about it, and I wish
and like Slipknot used that really heavily in the early days too. Not many people realize. Like Clown was a circuit bender, and just that there's a history there. It's a very Iowan history, very cool lineage that people just don't even realize.
Yeah, and
perhaps
I don't know what it is that intrigues me about it, but it's just something fun just watching people twist knobs and change the way sounds come out a speaker is pretty intriguing to me. I think one of the crazier things I saw was a guy playing guitar and somebody else was playing all of the effects, and that was like there was 2 people playing. One was playing a guitar and the other guy had all these effects in front of him, and he like somehow made it sound like crazier music by just turning on and off all these right effects at the right times, and that kind of blew me away.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, there was a lot of groups like Hawkwind way back when that started out with these really weird sounds on stage that nobody could identify, and they called it space rock.
All right.
And it kind of turned into its own genre. And that's where Lemmy got his start before he was in Motorhead.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's this crazy old group called Hawkwind. They had Space Ritual was one of their like live albums, and you can just hear this stuff happening live, and it's like the guy's reading the synthesizer manual as he's going with this big old Moog thing and plugging things in, and you're just like hearing this frequency happening that, you know, he didn't know what he was doing either.
Yeah.
And they were all on heavy amounts of LSD and other substances, so it was like a real cacophony of sounds. And it's got Lemmy in the middle of all of it, it's like singing and playing bass, all distorted and cool, and you're just like, wow, there's stuff that's been done that I've never heard before, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
that's like 50 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like the best educated music. I know a lot of music stuff, but I guess I didn't know that. So I'm going to be looking that up as well for sure. And that's pretty wild. So, like, I remember, I want to say maybe you posted a picture of it, but it was some guy standing in front of like one of the original Moog devices. And it was like just stacks and stacks of like little connections you could like connect together and run different circuits through and things like that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's just intriguing altogether, honestly. I just can't believe that that's something that somebody would... I don't know how somebody would get involved with all of the bending circuits and decide what they would do, but I don't know. That's one of the things is
or why, you know, like there's not a lot of practicability anymore with that. Like there's so many great plugins from Native Instruments and people that are like, you plug in, you put your MIDI thing on, and then you get this great sound. Like you would have probably taken 3 hours to develop with one of these other devices.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's a lot like a tube amp. You know, it's like there's certain things though that you just don't get out of Native Instruments. You don't get out of these plugins that are 64-bit perfection. That these analog devices, for whatever reason, when they get hot and go out of tune and the solder joint fell apart, you know, there's so many things that goes wrong with these old keyboards.
Yeah.
Just from the amount of maintenance that it takes to keep them running, you're inherently always fighting something.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is one of the quests for tone, I guess, is like usually the deeper you dive into it, the more money you're going to spend, even if it's just on upkeep. But it's going to be a thing that happens. But sometimes, I mean, even people that don't consider themselves tone snobs can definitely pick out the differences between the two. It just comes down to preference, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, you listen to those first Pink Floyd albums like Metal and like way before On the Run and all those cool things were happening, you know, before they really had a tact for how to use synthesizer in rock and roll.
Yeah.
There's the whole point of like See Sally Run, or I can't remember. There's a lot of really early Sid Barrett albums that everybody just blinks right past. They're like, what? I thought you said Dark Side of the Moon. Pink Floyd? No?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
You know, that totally just goes to this whole other explanation. I'm like, yeah, there was albums way before that, you know, that this just get shrugged, you know. I really love some of those different tones on Animals too, which is later stuff, and they feel like they kind of came back to that sensibility. Three Pigs had like a bunch of cowbell in it, and you're like, what? Cowbell in a Pink Floyd song?
Yeah.
You know, like you don't always identify these things sonically with what they are.
Yeah. I mean, that's the crazy thing, because like back then they didn't really have what we have today, where you could just, like you said, nowadays you could just take a keyboard, plug it into a MIDI thing that goes into a computer, dial up some tones on the computer that have already been, somebody else has already perfected. You could buy them from somebody and
it just seems like I'm putting ketchup on somebody else's hot dogs. You know, I didn't make any of this.
Yeah, true. That's true. And that's like the wild thing about back then, is they actually had to go through and blend sounds together to find the one that was the one that defined them the best, you know?
Yeah. Like, Judas Priest used, silverware in, Metal Gods on the end. That big clunking marching sound is just a bunch of hotel silverware being bashed on a case next to a microphone. And then they took an old guitar cord and they would whip it on the flight case as hard as they could, and then they would put that on a reverb, and it would sound like a big whip, you know? So they would do all these like S&M odd noises out of like mundane things. And I think that's when you're being most creative as an artist. You're not just sitting back and letting the producer decide how he's going to quantize your keyboard thing that was a native instrument.
Yeah.
You know, I don't feel like those are the same principles, you know. I mean, they are experimenting in two different directions, but
yes,
they're not the same.
I would definitely have to say that. Like playing to a metronome and playing in a live environment are two different things. They're not. One's not better than the other. They're just two different things, you know. And it's. I think about that was like the easiest thing I have to compare any of this to, where it's like, oh, this is two different styles of thing that are going two different directions. Not that people should ignore playing with a metronome, but like, you know, I prefer playing live a little bit better.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's just an organic feel that you can't replace. I take a lot of like things that Jack White does to heart. Like he'll play with two different backing bands, like one's male, one's female. Sometimes he'll mix members of both.
Oh, cool.
And he says that men and women play music differently.
I could see that.
And like, you know, some dudes just play from the gut, you know, and they kind of treat the guitar like a submachine gun, and they're Rambo, you know, they're just ready to go. I see that all the time. And then when I play in a female fronted band, I see a lot of the integrity that he's talking about from the female perspective of playing, that they don't attack the strings. They don't mash the notes, you know, they're so much more delicate. And not all women are delicate flowers by any means. I mean, I've seen chicks rock harder than any dude I know. So
oh yeah.
To make assumptions on any gender is ridiculous. But the integrity that some men lack, I mean, that's inherent, you know. It's not about gender at the end of the day either, you know. I mean, people are who they are.
No, but I bet, you know, it's got to be pretty cool being able to, you know, explore music with all different types of people. I mean, you were even talking before we did the podcast about playing in an Ozzy Osbourne cover band, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we're called Hack Sabbath. We're an Ozzy tribute band based right here in Waterloo, Iowa. You know, it's something that I grew up on, that I love. You know, you can't take the Zakk Wylde out of my tone. You know, there's certain Les Paul things that just happen. When I grew up with a lot of the Randy Rhoads albums, were like that was my number one influence, was listening to just old Ozzy live stuff, you know, and just hearing him shred for days. I could probably name every live recording that there is. I actually got in trouble one time from the Ozzy camp. I probably shouldn't comment too much on, but there was a cease and desist order.
We'll leave it at that.
Well, you know. You put something on YouTube, you shouldn't have, you know.
Oh, true. Yeah.
And it's still out there. You can still hear some of these things, but it was a few takes of Randy Rhoads, you know, from that weren't put out yet. No one had ever heard, and just to know that's out there and that nobody can have it, it's an odd thing, man.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. I mean, that's the benefit of recording something, because it's kind of like taking a picture, you know. Not all the pictures are for everybody. There's some pictures people take and don't put on social media or anything like that, and it's like, well, this is just for us. There's
privacy there, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess I could see that where like an artist would want to have that, you know, availability. Like maybe they make something that's not necessarily in their normal wheelhouse that they're known for, and they don't want to compromise the integrity that they've created with fans based on what they think they are, you know, or something like that.
Yeah, it's similar to what I noticed at Paisley Park. They were so like phones in cases that are made of lead that can't transmit, that are turned off, you know, and like all these just blankets over blankets over blankets of things that these big stars do all the time that we don't get to know about. And I just find it fascinating. Like there was a recent finding of Phoenix, Arizona footage that's linked to exist, but no one can see it, of Randy Rhoads playing live, like Pro Shot. And there's a lot of these things that have like started to leak in the time of, you know, higher quality internets, and things that have been sitting in closets with disenfranchised fans for years that, you know, you don't really hear about. You don't get that in your Rolling Stone usually, you know, some big leak like that. Now it seems like it comes in the form of a YouTube video or some anonymous content, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I remember that growing up, trying to get like all of the Iron Maiden B-side stuff, you know, and trying to find copies of everything on CD or some form or another, and they're like almost impossible to find. And like you said, nowadays you can almost just go to YouTube. I
still have a lot of those VHS.
And nowadays you can just go to YouTube and find most things, you know.
If not 98% of it, it's all backed up to YouTube, and it looks better than yours.
Yeah, what? That's true. That's true. And that's beneficial, but it's also kind of not, because these bands don't get to capitalize on some of their older material or some of their B-side stuff or stuff that was only on VHS and things like that.
But I try to live back in 1994 sometimes like that, though. I like to feel like you first discovered something, that I don't know, it's just got that caveman frozen in ice vibe, that you really want to be able to put hands on something again, and kind of get to relive that first time that you heard those albums you grew up with. I can't tell you how many times that like Blizzard of Oz was just such an amazing first listen, and just to get that feeling again for 10 minutes, it's kind of cool. I think that's the only time I've ever had any legal problems with the Osbournes. It wasn't even the Osbourne camp. It was Bob Daisley's camp. But, it was just a real simple YouTube cease and desist. It wasn't personal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I probably wouldn't say much more.
True. And that's one of those crazy things. Like I've always thought, I don't know you personally that well. This is the most we've sat down and talked, other than a couple times after a show. But I've always noticed that you've had such an appreciation, like a deep appreciation for music. And it's one of those things that's very apparent, just being, like your Facebook friend and seeing some of the things you post. It's very apparent that music is something you care about. And I mean, even to the point where you give guitar lessons in some form or another. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been given lessons here recently. I opened up my own studio in Cedar Rapids. I've just decided, that after a while, it was cool to be able to go all these places and record all the time, but I needed those tools at home. And this was a way I could coincide some of the economics with that. That there's a certain cost associated with starting any business, but I think what you need to do at the end of the day is just sit down and be able to learn again and be able to teach again, because you listen and you receive information differently when you're working with a student than you would if you were just to tackle this on your own.
Oh yeah.
And that's a reward that like not many people get to really be. That's something that Randy Rhoads also did a lot of. He was a guitar teacher in Pasadena, California, and he had hundreds of students.
Oh wow.
And that's why he got so good so fast, because if you listen to some of the Quiet Riot stuff, you can almost like see the building blocks in place. And it's so cool to be able to give back to people and not be stuck, writing something that you've already written. I see a lot of groups that, I'm not going to bash any one artist, but that there are some of these legacy groups that you see that from like the hair metal perspective that have released, 4 or 5 of the same album in a row.
And yeah, definitely.
If not worse than that, and ripping each other off and just all the tangibilities there that come with that. I feel like, I can teach people to play some of that style of music, but if I can teach them what that guitar player was influenced from, like what George Lynch had such a cool sound too. Like Randy was very individualized, and he actually taught at the Musonia where Rhoads had taught after Randy went out on the road.
Oh, cool.
And then George Lynch was going to end up trying out for Ozzy's band, and Jakey Lee got the ticket instead.
Oh, whoa.
So there's been this weird kind of like thing that was going on back then that I was always kind of like Eddie Van Halen talked to the same luthier, that helped George make his guitars that ended up making that polka dot V. So like these 3 really good shredders were all in the same circle together, and like what if they had a place where they could go and take lessons or something, or they had a way to communicate more back then, like that would have been such a cool time for rock and roll anyway. But it was like it would have been a lot cooler if they would have been able to like sit at some dojo and rocked out together, or maybe there would have been too many egos for them to do that. But it's cool nonetheless to be able to like kind of do that in a place. So I when my students come over, we'll pick a style or 2 or 3, and we'll kind of like, why is this guitar player the way that they are?
Mm-hmm.
Or, what makes Angus Young, those power chords, the SG,
yep,
and the pentatonics, those like, you'll pick out something like that and just be able to just kind of turn technique into, just more of like a tangible thing. It's not such a forbidden throne of rock and roll at that point,
Yeah, I totally get the concept you're coming after. Because, like, when I first started learning guitar, the internet was barely a tool that could be used to learn guitar. I mean, there were tabs to an extent, but videos weren't really on there, and there wasn't too much
Right.
of an explanation. I felt like there was this gatekeeper effect, like somebody was keeping the information from you. Like they had to learn the hard way. Now you've got to learn the hard way, and
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
any way that we can get past that is a good way, and that's kind of one of the things I like to try to do, especially with guitar. It's like, well, I grew up in a small town. There's no guitar teachers really around in my town specifically, so I was like, well, I'll give it a shot, and I've taught a handful of people how to play guitar, and some people took it and ran, and other people have not. And I haven't given very many lessons this year due to the pandemic, but it's one of those things I thought, if there's any way I can give back at all, I'd love to, just to inspire or something.
Yeah, and I still do that for fans and students and people. I don't think that many people really know that I'm doing it right now. It's kind of a word of mouth situation, because I don't make flyers and posters and put it all over town, because this is a crisis and we can't really avert that. But in the next couple of years, I think things will turn around and we can get back to normal.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we've covered most stuff. The only thing I don't know, did we discuss Brotherhood of Mudkat?
Yeah, there's a handful of other groups I play in. Yeah. There's Brotherhood of the Mudkat. There's Wicked Wizards. There's Pretty Dynamite. We're a cover band. I play with many different hats at all times, because I just don't like the liability of sitting around, or one person gets ill or can't tour or this or that. I've been in many, many, many boats before where it's either sink or swim and something doesn't go right, and you just have to make amends for that. I think creatively, though, I've been able to not stifle any of the process or progress of any of these bands. I've just been able to kind of try new things, And
Yeah.
I think everybody that's in those groups takes it that way.
That's
I
cool.
love having them around,
Yeah, I mean that's really neat that you have the ability to at least add your talents to somebody else's talents and not impede any of their talents by being there.
But yeah, I think Mudkat, we've done the most. We played with quite a few artists and names and places. We've gotten down to Iowa City many times. Gotten a chance to open up for people I never thought we would, like Power Man 5000.
Oh, cool.
I mean, just the drop list of like Necromantics and a couple of these other really cool artists that I grew up maybe listening to, that it's a different vibe. Hellstar was one. We were almost with Havoc, and a couple of those other shows fell through, I think. And then there was a couple times, just where Mudkat and Spacefire would play a gig with Frontal Assault, which is all related to Hall Records, which is we're all on this same little record label together that we've kind of made in our backyards.
That's pretty sweet.
My friend Bill Hall started it. Yeah, he's the bass player, and Space Virus as well.
Oh, sweet. That's really cool.
So it's all kind of related to each other in some bizarre way.
Dude,
We've been on a couple of different little radio stations around here too, with Mudkat and Space Virus. Got a little airplay, so that was kind of rewarding at the end of all this. That it's not just sitting on a computer somewhere. At least somebody got to hear it for a minute if they were tuning in.
yeah, no kidding. I mean, getting radio play is really fun, even in today's age where, it might not quote unquote mean as much as it used to, but it still
it's
still
not
does.
like MTV days, but it still feels like a little bit of a trophy at the end of all of this. That you're able to put something out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool that you got all this stuff going on. I mean, you're definitely busier than I had initially thought you were musically. Not that I didn't think you were busy. I already thought you had plenty on your plate, but it seems like you've got even more on your plate than I knew about. It's pretty wild.
Oh, yeah. It's a weird time, with the way the internet can streamline things, too. I mean, it's easier to get as busy as you want.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll snag some links from you here so I can put them in the description section. When everybody's done with the podcast, they can scroll down and find all of your good stuff down there. And
yeah, hopefully I can make the computers work again.
All right, man. Don't go away. I'm going to end the recording, but thanks for joining me, man.
Groovy, man. It was nice talking with you, and I hope all of our listeners had a good time.
Heck yeah. Thanks, man.
See you soon.
And see you soon indeed. If you guys need any more information other than what we gave you in the podcast here about the Rumours going on tour, I strongly suggest you follow the Rumours on any of their social media. There's plenty of it down below in the description section. If you're looking for them on Facebook, it's at the Rumours Band 13, the number 13. They're pretty easy to find. Just look for the Rumours. If you search for the Rumours on Google, it's going to come up with plenty of stuff as well. But it's all down below in the description section. Like I said, if you need any more information on that, what's going on as far as venues or locations or the tour or any more information at all on that, go to their social media and check it out. That's going to be the official place to find any of that information. So good luck to those guys on their upcoming tour dates that they have scheduled. And I got to say, huge shout out to Stu for taking some time out of his evening to sit down and talk with me. You know, as busy as he is, you know, it's probably hard to pry him away from the music. You know, he plays so much all the time. It's pretty cool. It's cool to see that somebody can add that much, you know, talent and thought process to as many different projects as he does, and still kind of hold it all together. I know it was kind of difficult for me for a while. I was doing 2 bands, and I was rehearsing for like a couple one-off gigs that I was doing as well, and just attending jam nights and things, and it's a lot to keep a handle on. But you know what, if you're dedicated and that's the important thing, then it's going to be the important thing. So hats off to him for being able to do it. It's a tough feat to accomplish. Like I said, if you want to check out any of his information down below, any of the bands that he's in, all that information is going to be down below, or as much of it as I could collect and put down there. I don't know how much text limitations I'm going to have depending on where I'm posting this, but I'll post them down in the description sections wherever you're listening to this. And hey, thanks again. I really appreciate Stu sitting down talking with me, and I appreciate all you guys sitting down and listening to this. So if you guys need anything more Audible Farm, go to audiblefarm.com. There is a link to our shop there. If you want to, support us in some way, you can buy a t-shirt or some stickers or something. And hey, hit me up. I'll ship them to you. You can buy them right there through the shop, and it'll be nice and easy. Otherwise, just go to shop.audiblefarm.com. You will find all of the shop stuff there as well. So check it out. Really appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate Couchtown Coffee sitting down, doing another sponsorship on another episode. Those guys have been running hard with us for a long time. It's definitely my favorite coffee. If I have to admit it, I will. I ran out of Couchtown recently, and I've been drinking not Couchtown, and it's not awesome. So hey, check out Couchtown Coffee. Been supporting us forever, and I love what they've got going on there. So hey, check it out, and also check out all of Stu's links, and now I'm gonna check out. So hey, thanks for joining me. Shout out again to Stu. Woo! And we'll check you later. Peace.